everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you all for being here today. It is spring. It's warm outside. Not yet. But it is great to see a lot of people. We were not expecting that many people in the room here. It is a pleasure to have you here. But if you are online as well, thank you for joining us. Today we have a lecture by Marcos Diclei on Francisco de Assis, and it's going to be really amazing. But before that, we always have the initial reading. Danny will do the initial reading, and I will come back for the initial prayer.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. The greatness of a man can be measured by his capacity for service to his fellow men and for humility and love. Great men stand out and cast a shadow. Wherever great men meet, there is an unquenchable light pointing the liberating way. The true heroes are unknown. They are more concerned with helping than with advertising their own acts. Become one of them in the silence of your achievements and the greatness of your smallness.
Now let us all close our eyes and thank God, our Creator, for the opportunity of being alive again on earth, to learn more and more, to progress in our spiritual evolution, to learn from our brother Marcos Diclei. Let's ask the spirits, and let's also vibrate good energies to Marcos Diclei so that he can give us the message with the enough energy and with all the enlightenment from the spiritual world. Let us all pay attention to the messages. Let's learn and use that on our lives from this day onwards. So be it. Marcos? Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Great to see everybody here in such a warm day. Inside is always warm. Welcome those watching us through the internet, also at Facebook and YouTube. We have our digital mediums there, Carlos helping us with the comments, and Elisa as well. So if you have comments or questions, feel free to chime in and participate with us. It's always good to be here as we all learn together. Otto mentioned about the learning opportunity with us, for all of us, is to remind ourselves of a very faithful servant of God and follower of Jesus, our brother Francis of Assisi, also known as the Sun of Assisi. And we do have a lecture already in our YouTube channel or Facebook about his works. So if you guys are interested, go back and search for it, because it talks about his life and in more details, different than what we are going to talk about today. We are still talking about Francis of Assisi today, but we are taking that in a different angle. We will not talk much of his life as we did in the other lecture that you have available, but we'll talk more about his message, some of the learnings that we have from his work that we can all apply in our daily lives. He is the son of Assisi, but he did the best he could, and he really did that well, to resemble the Son of immortality, which is Jesus, right? He was the one that in every second of his existence he tried, or he applied all his efforts to live a life as close to what Jesus taught us as possible. And I think this is all we are trying to do as well as Spiritists or as Christians, right? Or any other religion that tries to push us towards perfection, the relative perfection that we will get to achieve one day. But specifically about the Sun of Assisi, Francis of Assisi, he really lived a life to bring back the image, the message, the teachings of Jesus to all of us, which is our Sun of immortality, right? The governor of our planet. And that's why he lived every single moment of his life. Jesus spoke about a time of darkness that humanity was facing and still would face in its process of evolution, right? We all have to go through the darkness in order to understand the light, or else we don't know the difference. It's a kind of natural path. We make wrong choices until we understand the consequences and we learn about the better choices, and that's how we evolve as human beings. So humanity has been going through that process as well. And Jesus spoke about a dark period. It's in the Gospel of Matthew, right? A dark period when the hearts would get cold and hardened, and people would be persecuted because of him. And we all know about the Middle Ages, right? When Francis of Assisi lived, he was right in the middle of that period. A period where the message of light and hope and love of Jesus has been completely changed and adapted to our earthly interests, to our mundane interests of power and richness and pride. So it changes quite a bit. And Jesus never abandoned us since he departed. He always had messengers coming to us and reminding us of the core message of Christianity, of his message, which is the core of the Spiritist messages for us. And that's when Francis of Assisi came to give us another boost, to remind us of the pure message of Christ that was very darkened during the Middle Ages, right? If we remember about the Christianity of the Middle Ages, it was a period where the message was controlled. The gospel was very controlled to an elite. Even the language was only Latin, and people like us wouldn't have access to it, right? Many people were just excluded. They had no idea what was talking about. And that's the environment when Francis grew up. He had no idea what they were talking about, until he had a priest who was a friend of his, and he said, "Hey, can you tell me what you guys are talking about?" And he finally spoke in plain Italian for him, because Francis lived in Italy, right? And he was marveled with the beauty of the message of the gospel that Christ left us. It was a time where we had the Crusades, right? Persecuting everyone who was against the power of the church at that very moment. So people had to comply to the rules of the church, accept the power of the church. So a lot of people died, and a lot of wars were conducted in the name of the church, in the name of Christ. It sounds absurd, right? Wars in the name of Christ. Would he ever sponsor a war? He would never do that. But that was our understanding. That's how we evolve, gradually understanding. It was a time of fires. Who doesn't remember the Inquisition, right? The fires of Inquisition. The so-called witches. They were mediums like us, or just people who spoke up differently than the rules of the church at the very moment. And a lot of people were just burned alive in the fires of Inquisition. In the book On the Way to the Life, psychographic by Chico Xavier, Emmanuel speaks about that period, which was a period of darkness for humanity. And that whole movement of Inquisition, it held behind the progress of humanity in more than 600 years. Basically, nothing is lost for God, right? Even the unfortunate events are recycled and they become learning for us. But all that Inquisition process held humanity in about 600 years. Imagine where we would be today if it wasn't for that. But it still served the purpose for our own learning, right? The luxury and the excesses, right, of the church, and we were all part of it. And now we see a different Pope, right, very humble, bringing back the message of Christ for us. And this is where all religions are converging, and we'll get there one day, to the crystalline teachings that Christ really meant for us to understand and to live. So it was a period of darkness when Francis incarnated with a beautiful mission, Francis of Assisi, right? To remind us of the crystalline purity of the gospel of Christ, putting aside all the earthly, temporary things like power, right, and wars and segregation. This was all creations of us human beings. It wasn't creations of God or Christ himself. And it's another example for us to remind ourselves that Jesus, for more than he left us physically, more than 2,000 years ago, he never left us alone. Continuously we have emissaries coming to the planet to remind us of his teachings, because we need lots of reminders, right? So he never abandoned us. And in the same book, On the Way to the Light, that we just mentioned, Emmanuel and Chico Xavier talks about Francis of Assisi, and he talks about Francis with these words: one of Jesus' greatest apostles reincarnated as Francis of Assisi. And if we do a little bit more research in other works, we will know that Francis of Assisi is no other than John the Evangelist back to remind us of the crystalline, the beloved disciple that we see in the Gospels. There was him back again to bring us back the crystalline, the pure message of Christ. That's the blessing of reincarnation, isn't it? So Francis was born in 1181, and he passed away in 1226, right in the Middle Ages, right? He passed away with 45 years old, fairly young, and he actually woke up for Christianity at 27 years old. So he really had 18 years old to do all his marvelous work that changed the world at that time and still resonates with us today. And if we read a little bit about the message of Francis, it's evident that he was very passionate, right? There's even a beautiful movie, if you guys have a chance to watch. It's Claire and Francis, or Francis and Claire. It's just a beautiful message, and we can see how passionate he was for life, right? And it's as if his heart was on fire for the arts, for the nature and the animals, and the poor and the sick. He really respected every single thing. He wouldn't hurt an ant, because he would see in everything a creation of God. And he really felt himself as part of that creation of God. So if an ant and himself were created by God, we are brothers, right? So such a pure and deep sentiment that, you know, it got really cold in many of our hearts throughout history. And here we are trying to ignite that fire, to warm that feeling of, brotherhood among all of us. And he was to see that. Francis used to see that even on the plants. They the friars, right, and his order, they used to work to get what to eat and have the basics to dress, and they would plant as much as they could. They didn't have land, so they would do a service for others in exchange for some food. And they even appreciated the life of a weed. They were, you know, taking care of a crop of potato, and all of a sudden there was a weed. They would go there and remove the weed and plant the weed somewhere else. That's how much they appreciated the life and the creations of God. If it was me, I would just go into my garden, just crush the weed and throw it away, right? So he is clearly in a different level, no question on that. But that was Francis, appreciating nature at the minimal levels as creations of God. Imagine other human beings. Imagine Christ or God himself, right? He loved music, he loved nature, and above all God, of course. And he would see what others wouldn't. As I said, in a simple weed that we would go to our grass in our backyard and remove and throw in the garbage, he would see a sister or a brother, creations of God. He was in a different level of understanding and communion with the universe, right? Something that we all need to bring back to our hearts, or acquire that as a moral characteristics for us, right? That's why we live in family. That's why we live in society, that we can start having that feeling from each other, human beings. And all of a sudden we have a pet at home, or maybe a plant, right? Or something that, you know, or someone that can start reminding us of why we are here for, to learn to love, right? And he knew that we were connected by a cosmic relationship, because everything has been created by God. He would see every nature phenomena, every creature in nature as brothers and sisters, right? No wonder he would call brother sun, sister moon. He would see that communion with nature that, you know, some of us long forgot in the rush of our daily lives. Sometimes we have a hard time to see our co-workers in the office as part of a family, or even in the churches, right? On the Spiritist group, we have a hard time seeing each other as part of a family. He would look like a dog on the street and would treat that dog as a brother, because he had that cosmic vision that everything is a creation of God. So we are connected by a cosmic web of fraternity, right? We are all wired together and interrelated together. And it's interesting that he would look at the animals and he would talk to them. He was so deeply immersed in love, in a universal love that we are still learning, that once he was preaching, Francis was preaching to a group of people, talking about the gospel, and the animals used to follow him. And there were trees behind him, and they were full of birds, and the birds are chirping, and people have a hard time to talk to him. And he said, just wait a minute. He turned around, and he said, brothers, sisters, I'm trying to talk about our Lord, but people cannot hear me because you are so joyful and full of love and energy, but I need your help. I need you to be quiet for a few instants, in a few moments. And guess what? The birds were silent like this. And he turned back and continued his sermon. So some of us may say, that's a story for kids to sleep. No, it's actually in his works, right? And written several things. There was once a city of Gubbio in Italy, and there was a wolf that would come to the villages and go after the chickens, the animals, go into the house to get food, and even go after people and hurt people. And everybody was kind of afraid, and they complained to Francis about the wolf. So he went alone to the forest and found the wolf and approached it carefully and spoke with the wolf. Said, "Brother wolf, don't do that. People are afraid of you. They have to work, and they have kids, and they have things to do, and you are stealing from them. That's not something nice. That's not a Christian behavior. Please stop. Be your friend. I will be your friend, and if you are hungry, we'll give you food, but stop hurting people and stealing from us. I will help you. You can be with me, but live in your community in peace." He was talking to a wolf. Yeah. And the story, part of his books, because the friars, his companions, they wrote all those stories that they heard from Francis or they witnessed. So there are works of Francis around, and those are written stories, right? So he told the wolf, "Follow me to the village, and I'll give you some food. I know you were hungry. And then you can live with us as long as you don't do that anymore." And the text says that the wolf gave the paw to him. He shook the paw with the wolf, and brought the wolf to the village, gave him food, and the wolf became friends with everyone in the village and lived in the village. And right, so that was Francis' connection with the creation of God beyond human beings. Not even talking about the first encounter that he had with someone who had leper, right? Is that the right word for the disease? Huh? Yeah, it's a skin disease, right? It's leper, right? So he saw a man, he was so moved by his sadness for being segregated in society and discriminated, right? Living alone, that he embraced and kissed him, and the man was shocked. And from that moment on, he decided to bring all those sick people who lived, far from the cities and be there for them until the end of his time. So he did things that people would consider insanity, but he loved. And there are many, many stories that we could talk about Francis of Assisi. It's a marvelous story, but we'll focus on a few things that we all can take from his life today instead of going back to his whole story. So one of the things that is in his writings, and it's something that we want to dig a little bit and take something from us personally, is a passage from one of his writings. And he said, "I do not wish my brothers to be anxious for books and knowledge, but I desire them to be grounded in three things: holy humility and pure simplicity, holy prayer, and my lady poverty." So three key characteristics that Francis lived, and he did all he could in his whole life to be that example, to set the example, and to put that into everyone's hearts, everyone who lived him, right? Those three virtues, I would say, and that's what we're going to deep dive a little bit today. But the interesting thing is what he said at the very beginning: don't be anxious for books and knowledge. And I can speak for myself here. At the very beginning, when we get into Spiritism or maybe Christianity as well, because of our pride, right? We want to get to know everything, to be able to explain everything, right? Maybe to show off to others how much we know, how good we are. So we all go through that journey, right? Until the day we started understanding and transforming ourselves. And sometimes we say we want to get into Spiritism, or we want to get into Christianity. It's being part of it and knowing it all. And that's the first step. But the second step is actually when we understand that instead of being immersed into the teachings and the knowledge and everything, is to let the knowledge and the teachings get into our hearts. And that's when the transformation really happens. That's why Francis talked about don't be anxious for books and knowledge. That's not an excuse for us not to study and do not come into our study groups, or not to open the New Testament or the Spiritist book or whatever belief you follow. That's not an excuse to abandon that. Because if we don't study, we'll never get to know. We'll never think properly. We will accept things, oh, that's because someone said so. This has been repeating for centuries with us. And how many mistakes we have done as human beings or individuals because of accepting things because someone said so. It's time for us, right? And that's why Allan Kardec brought us the message of Spiritism, to free our conscience and welcome questioning, welcome understanding, so we can build our faith in a solid ground. No more because someone said so. We are open to questions. We are open to criticize in a positive way, to learn, right? So that's what Francis is saying here. Don't be anxious for book and knowledge, but we gotta be careful with that. Let's not abandon knowledge and study, because that is part of who we are, human beings. So we have to question, we have to understand, we have to find the study groups where we have a forum to ask the questions that we have in our minds and our hearts, that sometimes we don't have the space to ask those questions to our neighbors, to our co-workers. They may think you're just crazy. You're thinking about reincarnation. You're thinking about your responsibility in life. Just do your job. What are you talking about? Life mission? Right? Or you have something that it's heavy in your heart. Some people just don't understand that. That's why it's important that we live in a group of people that are trying to go toward the same direction, learning together. Right? So don't be anxious for books and knowledge, but yeah, we have to study so that we can improve ourselves. There's no other way, right? But the core of the message for Francis is to actually be, right? To be the example, to follow the example of Christ for us. And we all can do a little bit. And if we, like we studied in the Spiritist study group last week about the different levels, right? And Allan Kardec put that in such a nice, beautiful way, which is Spiritism starts with the explanation of all the phenomena that we have, right? Which is the scientific observations of the phenomena around us. But we can't stop there, because that doesn't make us better. That doesn't change us. That kind of wakes us up. Then the second step is really observing the philosophical consequences of those observations. Hey, there is life after death, so how that changes me? So why am I here? So we start asking questions really to wake us up. But if we also stop there, it doesn't make us better. It doesn't change anything. It's just knowledge. And then the third step, that's what Francis lived the most, and that's the ultimate destination of Spiritism for us, is the religious aspect. But when we talk about religious, it's really the connection with God, or the connection with our true self, because we are immortal beings. That brings the whole group together, and that makes sense, right? We all have a destination. We are all immortal beings, and this is what Francis lived, and these are some of the things that we want to talk about today, right? The first item he speaks about is the whole humility and pure simplicity. It seems that it's easy for us to complicate things, right? It's easy to make things bigger. The real challenge is, how do we make things smaller, simple, clean, easy to digest, easy to carry, easy to use. That's the art in many aspects of life, in building cars or objects or houses, you name it. Simplicity is way more difficult than complexity, because we are complex. It's part of who we are. And spiritually speaking, this is the invitation from Francis to all of us, right? The whole humility and the whole simplicity. And if we remember a beautiful message from Jesus for us when he was with the disciples in some of his final moments, he said, if anyone wants to be first, he must be the very last and the servant of all. Because we are anxious to be too big always. Because it's part of our learning, right? We want to do big in everything we do. And the real challenge is how can we get smaller so he can get bigger. That's the real learning for us. Because we all have pride and aspirations and desires in life. Some are very valuable and important, but some are like cotton candy. As soon as we have them, they pass. They were not important. We think they are important, but they're really not important. And how do we know what is important or not? We need to make that silence, right? To listen to our hearts. To listen to our guardian angels or spiritual protectors, whoever you want to call them. Everyone has one who is with us, assisting us every single time, every single day we need them. But we don't make silence to listen to them. And yeah, we don't usually listen with our ears, but with our hearts, with few. But to do that, we got to make the silence. So, humility is at the core of what Francis lived and encouraged us, such as what Jesus lived and encouraged us, right? Which is very different than weakness. Because of our proud hearts, we tend to mix humility, right, with weakness. In the contrary, to be humble, it's a sign of strength. That's why we struggle so much to be humble, because we are still learning. The one who is humble is not afraid of what people will think. The one who is humble doesn't need to be the best, to be the number one. Just need to do the best he or she can, right? And the one who is humble put others first instead of putting yourselves. Humility helps us to be at service, right? To serve others, even in the small things, instead of expecting others to serve us. And we see this every day. You go to a bus, there's always the one rushing to get the seat. Sometimes it's us. You go to a coffee shop, I'm the first that want to get the coffee. I'm in the office, I'm the first to expect praise for the boss. So we're always expecting to be first. There's something wrong with that trend. How that can help to serve others. Not to say that we should be lazy and stop striving to be good at what we do. No, that's not what we're saying, right? But that desire to be the number one on everything and having admiration of everybody for us, there's something wrong with that, right? And that's why Jesus came, putting himself, who was the governor of the planet, in the last place, serving everyone and cleaning our dirty feet. Not sure if you know, but at that time the Jewish had slaves to clean the feet of the guests. They wouldn't clean because they thought this is not a task that a Jewish person would do. So they have a slave. And then Jesus said, no, I'm going to do that. To give us the example that there's no such thing as slave or you are so important that you cannot do anything. We are all equal. We are all equal. And he did it. So imagine the disciples. No, master, you're not going to wash my feet. Say, you know what? If you don't let me wash your feet, then you are not my disciple. So you don't love me. He said to Peter. And he said, Master, you can wash my feet, my leg, my arms, my neck, everything. Right? So, and that was Jesus, the governor of our planet. And here we are living in today's society, expecting everyone to admire us, to do things for us, to serve us. It's time that we have a reality check. What if I start doing something for someone? Right? What if we try to think less about us and more about others? That's the message. That was the life that Francis lived. He would see someone without clothes, he would take off his coat and give it to that person. He wouldn't care. They went to extremes, obviously, right? I'm not saying for you to go into the street right now and give your clothes to the first person you see and be naked in the coat. That's not what I'm saying. But it is an analogy for us to think less about ourselves and more about the others. That's a good start, right? Not only materially speaking, but sentimentally also. When someone needs to talk about their problems, sometimes we jump with our problems and then we don't even listen. Oh, you know, you think your problem is too big? Let me tell you something. Right? So it's us first, me first, me first, me first all the time. That's the message of Francis. Think about the others. Let's help the others. Right? We are in a beautiful country, and it's not by accident. We are all here gathered together. Whenever you are, we are here. It's not by accident. Let's do something with it. Oh, but it's not as big as Francis. Of course, we are not him. We are far from him. But we all can do a little. In our homes. Oh, I live alone. Oh, you can do something with your neighbors or in your work. Oh, I don't work. In your school. It doesn't matter. Oh, I don't go to school. You take the bus. Oh, so do something for someone in the bus when you are there. Give your seat to someone. Maybe you change their day. Maybe you give them encouragement. Wow, there's some goodness around. It's not as bad as I think. I don't know this lady, and she gave me her seat. Who knows what an act of kindness can do for someone who is losing the hope in life? We cannot tell that. All we can do is just to do something the best we can. And that's what Francis did every single day. A piece of bread. He would see something hungry, he would go after and find a bread and give to that person. He did something for that person and didn't expect thank you or nothing. That's the other thing we do often as well. We do a bread and then you keep looking at the person. Are you going to say thank you? 5 minutes already. So we always expect something, right? Give and forget. That's part of our learning. That's part of our learning. Are you guys all with me? Okay. And the other example of service was Mahatma Gandhi, right? And it's very hard for us, and we get it, right? When we say those things, we are very imperfect. We are not Francis of Assisi. We are not Jesus. But I like the example of Mahatma Gandhi. Once a mother brought her son to Gandhi. He said, Bapu, they used to call him, right? This boy, I don't know what to do with him. He doesn't eat anymore, but he just eats sugar and candies, and he's getting sick. And can you tell him to stop eating sugar? And Gandhi looked at the boy, and said, yes, come back in 2 weeks. What? He's here right now. I can't talk to him right now, so come back in 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks have passed. The mom came back with the son. Papu, can you talk to him right now? He said, yes, I can talk to him right now. Son, stop eating sugar. And the mom looked. Is that it? Why didn't you tell 2 weeks ago? Oh, because I was still eating sugar. How would I tell him to stop eating sugar if I wasn't? So I need time to stop. So now I know that, yes, it is possible. Now I have the moral authority to tell him to stop eating sugar. So, son, stop eating sugar. Right? So it's a good example for us that it is hard, right, to do our moral transformation. And we are here not because we stopped eating sugar. It's because we are going through the same struggles that everybody is, right? But it's important that we do our best to leave that in ourselves. We can't change the others. We can't change others. We can only change ourselves. And that's already a big thing. If we leave Earth when the day comes, as far as it comes in the future, better than we here arrived, mission accomplished. Will we change others? No. If we have that expectations, it's the wrong expectations. Every single one of us are only responsible. We can only affect our choices. We can do our best to make our choices be an example to others, but that's secondary. First is really changing yourselves, right? I think that's a bonus. If our examples help someone else, it's a bonus. But it's kind of out of control. We can't change Otto, Patrick, others. We can change ourselves. And that's why we are here, right? That's why we are here. once also one of the friars came to Francis and asked Francis, you know what? You are not pretty. You're kind of ugly. You didn't go to school. I don't understand why people follow you and respect you so much and they want to be with you and they love you. I don't get it. How come? And then it was one of his friars, right? One of the closest friars, Brother Maceo. And he said, oh, that's very true. So let me think about it. And he asked a couple minutes to think about why people look up for him. And he answered, well, it's because God picked the ugliest person, the most inferior person, the person with most defects, to show humanity and every single one that we can still change and do something good and beautiful. That's why he picked me, and that's why people resonate with me and are trying to follow me. Not because I am special or beautiful or anything, right? So that was the message of Francis in the simplicity. And we all can do that, right? We all can do something good that can resonate for others. So that's about the humility in the simplicity aspect, right? That we all should strive to have. It's way harder, the simplicity, than the complexity, right? It's easy to be complex and with inflated egos and big. The challenge is how can we get smaller, right? How can we serve? We all want to be on the spotlight, but it's really a harder and a precious thing to be in the background helping humbly, right? The other item that Francis talks about is about praying, right? And he talks about a holy prayer. And I was thinking, what is the difference between prayer and holy prayer? Why holy prayer? Doesn't it suffice just to get and together with ourselves at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, and pray for God or for whoever we want to pray? Doesn't it suffice just to read the Pai Nosso, right? Our Father, or the other prayers? But Francis spoke about holy prayer because he says idleness is the enemy of the soul. In our prayer, our faith needs to be an active faith. If we are praying, it needs to be an active prayer in our actions as well. Because it's pretty easy to talk, right? The easiest thing ever is to come here and give just a lecture. Now when we go back home, when no one is watching, we are going to prove to ourselves and no one else that we are applying the efforts to be better, right? In the silence, not on the spotlight. So when he talks about holy prayer, he's not talking about the idleness of empty words, but active words, right? A prayer is actually in our actions. We can be prayer by doing something without saying a single word, right? And André Luiz actually made a reference one day to an analogy of the clock and the time that passes in our lives, and he said that the clock of the watch of a Christian should actually say to serve, to serve, to serve, to serve, instead of tic-tac, right? So Francis of Assisi lived that because he was at the service at every time. And how about for us, the Spiritists? It's the same thing, because a Spiritist and a Christian is the same thing. And sometimes we expect the other way around. We look at our watch and serve me, serve me, serve me, serve me. That's what we expect. We have greater expectations for us, right? We need to start practicing changing that to the opposite and try to serve people. And sometimes serving people is doing something for them, but sometimes it's not judging them. Sometimes it's just being silent. Sometimes it's not criticizing. Sometimes it's giving them the seat. Sometimes it's saying that, hey, good to see you. You look great today. Right? Sometimes we get to know people. We know their struggle. Give them something. That is charity. It's not, pity or emptiness, an empty action. It's really meaningful, doing that for the sake of doing and helping and being at service, right? This is praying as well. Active praying, right? And Francis encouraged praying, not, some of the costumes in the past of maybe still today living in isolation, right? In some corner of the world, living in complete isolation and praying 24/7. He always said, no, we gotta pray by living in the world as an earthly man or women, doing something for us and for others. Active. Oh, the world is so messy. We are messy, right? We are imperfect beings, and the world is imperfect, but we are in the best place at the best time and in the best conditions of our entire life. We were never as good as we are today. Period. It's the law of evolution. It's part of the law of the universe. We just move forward. Isn't that great? We are at the best of ourselves today. And if we don't like it, we can still improve. We just need to start moving and shake it off and move forward. Right? That's what we can do. So Francis says that holy prayer means that our life is a prayer. Our life is a prayer to God of gratitude for who we are, for what we are, for in what conditions we are, for what we have, in gratitude for the people around us. Even if it hurts, it's because it's what we need. It's like giving a medicine to our kids, right? Buckleys. Give them Buckleys. It's just the worst taste ever. It's an advertisement, right? It works. That's what they say. But it works, right? So sometimes we are going through so much struggles in life, but it works. It's the medicine that we need, right? And that's why Francis talks about an active prayer, right? Elevating our God, our gratitude, and asking for support and strength so that we can continue moving on. We shouldn't expect perfection. We won't be perfect in this incarnation, but we can expect to be a bit better. A bit better. One step forward. That's enough. If we expect to be perfect, let's listen to our heart and make sure this is not pride. Make sure we are not hurting because we feel we are not as good as that person or that person. Because if that is how it feels, let's try to put that behind. Right? Because we are not better than anyone. We are not in a competition with anyone. We are in a kind of a competition with ourselves. Can we be better today than we were yesterday? Can we be better tomorrow than we are today? This is it. What if I discarnate today? If I die today, what people will say? It doesn't matter. What matters is, what will we think? Am I doing the best? No, I'm not doing. So why not? Oh, it's because of this. So let's do something about it. Let's do something about it. We are not in a race to be better than anyone else on the planet. We are in a race to be better than what we are today. When we discarnate and we meet our guardian angel or protector spirit or whoever you want to call him or her, that spirit is helping us every single day in the moment that we need. What we're going to tell. Thanks for your help and appreciate it, and you're really helping me, or sorry, it didn't work, or I forgot about you. I should have thought about you more often. Right? So we have that time right now, that reminder. So holy prayer is an active prayer. It's not empty words. It's really, as Francis did, his life was a prayer to God in every second. He didn't need to say a word, although he prayed a lot. But we need to get to the point where when we are doing something, we are praying. We are giving something to someone and we are praying, may this help you in something. Or may this encounter help me in something. Or thank you for seeing that person, that friend. Or thank you for this. Right? Gratitude is a prayer in itself. We don't need to stop and knee or anything. Right? And sometimes even in our offices with a lot of problem, you go to the washroom, you mentally do your prayer. You don't need to be in a church, in a Spiritist center. Right? We connect with God anywhere, anytime. That's the most precious thing. There's a prayer that we're not going to talk about here because of time, which is the Peace Prayer of St. Francis, that you can look it up on the internet. But he starts saying, make me an instrument of your peace. It's active. The better prayer for us is active prayer. And we work with Jewish, we work with Hindus, we work with Buddhists, we work with Catholics, we work with atheists. It doesn't matter. Our actions with them can be a prayer. Respecting, helping, assisting, understanding, not judging, not criticizing. So we can be prayer in the office with all those people without saying, hey, I'm a Spiritist and I want to do a prayer with you right now. You don't need to do that. We can make our actions be a prayer for them. Right? We can listen to them. This is charity. It's not only about giving money, right? So the prayer of Francis of Assisi, I encourage all of us to take a look and study, because it is beautifully simple and still hard to do, but it's worth to reflect on it and do our best. And he says in the middle, "O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console." Why not so much seek? Because we will all seek to be consoled, because we are not perfect, right? So not so much seek. I leave some room to try to console others, not only think about ourselves. Not so much to be understood, because we expect people to understand us, and we still need people to understand, but I expect that people understand us less, and then we make more effort to understand others. Because maybe we know something, we heard something that the others didn't. So they don't know. How can we expect, right, a child to behave, to do a complex calculation because they didn't go to school? They don't know, they don't understand, but we do. So we can do it. They will get there. It's the same with spiritual evolution condition, right? It's a gradual process. Same as love, right? Not so much seek to be loved as to love, which is a learning for us. We are still learning to love. So I encourage you all to take a look at the prayer of St. Francis, because it's really beautiful, it is simple, and we all can do our best to live that in our daily lives. And the last item from that little teaching from him is about the lady poverty, right? He spoke about the very beginning. Should be grounded in the lady poverty. So he's really talking about humbleness, living in this world in a humble manner. And we all know about the gospel and the saying that it's easy for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich to get into the kingdom of God, right? That's a very shocking image, right? A camel going through the hole of a needle. It's because there was a word in Hebrew, I think, that camel was the same as a very tight cord. So you imagine a big cord like this going through a tiny needle, right? It's easy for that cord to go into that tiny hole than for, someone wealthy and rich to go to the kingdom of heaven or accomplish their moral tasks in this planet. Why is that? Because we are so attached to materialism. And Francis preached a lot, and he lived a life around simplicity. They had their tunic, and that's all. They would work to eat, and that's all. They wouldn't care about material things. And we're not saying for us to live a life like that and become beggars right now and live on the street. But we should rethink our expectations for life. Right? Sometimes we sacrifice, the best impulses of our hearts. We sacrifice our families and friends for aspirations so big, and at the same time, things that will pass. Because everything that we have today, when we leave this planet, we are not bringing them with us. Or cars, or houses, right? The money in the bank. Yeah, we need to save for retirement. Yeah, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, so we need to have a little bit of discipline. But do we need, so many cars, so many clothes, so many houses, right? We create a life of death and concerns to pay so many bills because we want to have more and more and more. Well, what's the point? We are missing the point. Francis gave us an example of simplicity that we should think about it, right? We should think about having what we need to live. Yeah, we should have some financial discipline and be prepared for tomorrow. We never know. But sacrifice the objective of being alive today for the sake of accumulating things financially, that is what we need to rethink. Right? How many people lost everything they had from one day to another just by a fluctuation in the stock markets? Right? Not saying that we all should become beggars, but we should not become spiritual beggars because we are running after the riches of the world that can just disappear like this. Right? So one of the messages from Francis for us, and Spiritism talks about the objective of being here. Why are we here? Is it to be rich? To enjoy life? And this is it? There has to be more than that. God is so wise, and Jesus is so wise and benevolent that they wouldn't put us here just to enjoy life. And that's part of our individual journey to reflect on that. That's what we discuss in our study groups here, because it's important that we talk and discuss and think and ask, because if you don't do that or try to accept that because someone said so, that's not going to last very long. It's like a plant that has the root in a bunch of rocks. The first light of sun will just burn those roots. It doesn't go deep. We need to start spending some time reflecting on those questions in our lives. Right? Maybe we spare a movie here and there and do some thinking and talking and studying and watch something online or come to a study group, because those are important questions for us. It's between have things or be someone different and better. It's very different. Be and have. And we spend much of our life in the have thinking, right? I expect to have this, expect to have that, and we expect less to be like this, to be like that. It's very important. Everything that we have, material, will pass. We will leave behind. But anything that we become, we will carry with us no matter where we are, where we go. Those are the spiritual acquisitions that we'll take with us, and this is why we are here. We are not here to have stuff and go to the cemetery with 2 big luggages that would better be used by someone who is alive, because it would just rotten in our coffins. But anything that we become, we will carry for us no matter where we are, no matter where we go. Right? So Francis wasn't against anything, and we are not against anything, but we are in favor, like he was, in favor of humility. He wasn't against riches, but he was in favor of simplicity. Right? He was in favor of living a life with a purpose. Right? It's very different. And we are wrapping up, my friends, just saying, let us do our best to spend time thinking about our lives. Encourage you to watch that beautiful movie. Encourage you to reflect on the prayer of Francis, such as Jesus was the moral sun of humanity radiating everywhere. Francis was the Sun of Assisi, as many call it. There is a book in our library that's called Sun of Assisi by Divaldo Franco, which is a beautiful book about his life. It's a beautiful story. And we have so many sons like Chico Xavier as well, who dedicated his life and to us in humanity. And so many beautiful things. I would like us all to remind that his heart was always on fire. He was always, full of energy and love and jumping like a kid. That was Francis, right? Because he felt the love of God, and something that we are developing yet. And it's okay if we don't feel like jumping here and there. If we feel our hearts heavy, it's okay, because we are not perfect. And we are still developing that connection with God. It may take a while. But what is not okay is that we lock ourselves into that. Because that doesn't help us. Our time here is limited. So we should ask for help. Or we should question, right? And think and write down and find someone that we can talk to. Even here at the TSS, talk to someone. Talk to one of the counselors during the private conversations that we have, or talk to a friend or a relative. But we should open up and clean up our house, because our time here is precious, right? In our guardian angels, and a lot of people in the spiritual world, and a lot of people incarnated here, they are cheering up for us. They desire the best for us. They are there to help us. But we are the ones that a lot of times we lock the doors. We lock ourselves down. And we need to open up. We need to open up. Francis had an absolute confidence that anything that happened with him was the best that could and should happen to him, because he had full trust in God. So if things are hard for us today, it's not because God doesn't love us, our partner doesn't love us. It's because we have something to learn. We are all here to learn. Earth is a giant school, and one of the many that we are going to have in the future. So if we have a struggle, it's because we have something to learn. But we can only learn if we make silence to hear our hearts, to hear our guardian angels. And Francis knew that. If you read about his life story, he was a life of suffering. But he learned his lessons and he embraced those suffering. So the invitation for all of us here is that as we are going through our struggles, let's ask ourselves, what do we have to learn? Why this is such a roadblock in front of me and I can't move? What is it that I need to learn? Because that's the objective. We are not on this planet because we are here to be punished. We are here to learn, to love, to become better. And it's not by accident we are together with people who are trying to do the same. They are going to go to the same struggles. And we may think that someone is happier than us. I wish I was like that. I wish I was like him or her. We are all in the same boat. Some of us hide better than others. That's the difference. But together we can help each other more. So as Francis said, let's be grounded by whole humility and pure simplicity, in holy prayer, and in His Lady poverty. Let's really ask ourselves, is it worth so much effort and sacrifice for the things of the earth? Or should we save a little bit of room for the things of the immortal spirits? because we are immortal spirits. So may God bless us all and help us to reflect on those beautiful lessons. Thank you. Thank you, Marcos. Does anybody have a question? Maybe someone from the internet? Okay.
Say that sometimes we are quick to try to change things in others, but forget, however, to look at our imperfections. It is not easy to admit to our imperfections, because this would require to actually take a look at our inner selves and admit to our imperfections, because this would mean admitting that we would need to change ourselves and start our inner transformation. Not easy to do, but to study, we can become more familiar with the teachings, and this gives us the strength to keep going forward and to keep trying, and we should eventually get there. Such a beautiful message that gives us hope. Thank you for the lecture.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. That's very true, right? We are destined to good and happiness. God in His perfection created us to be good and perfect. And it's a journey. And He is so good that we are not forced to accept that. We have free will. And we choose when the time comes, right? But yes, selfishness and pride are the two big wounds that we as humanity still have, right? And if we don't know what's our mission, why we are here, simple as that. Let's close those wounds. Let's clean and close them, right? Let's tackle selfishness and pride. If we're able to improve on those two fronts, we have our mission accomplished. And each of us will move the needle, more or less according to our efforts, according to our needs. So we should compare ourselves less to others and look ourselves inside more, right? And advance. But thank you, Anna. Appreciate your comment. Any other question? Just one comment that just came to mind. I always, when I come here and I hear those messages about those well-known guys, we always so I like it. I like to have those examples, and even if it is not to compare myself to any of them, because we are not one day we'll get there, but we are not there yet. But a lot of people just think that, maybe next incarnation, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe next incarnation. They just push out those dates instead of doing something now, right? So that's something that I try to, even if I can't do everything that they are doing, they did or they are doing right now, at least doing something just a little bit, as you mentioned during the lecture, right? So it's what we have to do. So we are here to progress, even if it is a little bit. So that's part of the message, right? Yeah, exactly. We shouldn't force ourselves beyond our conditions, but we should make efforts as much as we can, right, to improve every day a little bit. Compare ourselves less with others. But yeah, that's the message, right? And Jesus is really the model for us. That's the the Spirit's book question, right? What's the model that God gave humanity to follow to reach happiness and perfections, right? It's the Spirit's book 625. It's Jesus. Yeah, that must be. He is the one. Yeah, it's hard. Jesus is Jesus. He's the governor of the planet. How can I compare with him? Well, we're not comparing ourselves, but using him as a model. He is way far. Yeah, but we'll get there one day. We are destined to that. That's the perfect, the relative perfection that we are destined to, all of us. Is it far in the future? Yes. How far? Well, it depends how soon we start, adjusting our imperfections. But it doesn't matter how far. It matters is we start now. Yeah. Let's not leave for the next incarnation. Because Earth is in a beautiful moment of transformation right now. and we hope that we can come back to this planet. It will be a better planet soon, and we need to do our best to improve so we can come back to this renewed planet, right? We shouldn't postpone. We postpone too much already, right? We should get together with people who are going through the same struggles, who are trying to improve themselves as well, and keep moving on.
Yep. Thank you, Marcos. We are going to now to wrap up. Thank you all for all of you watching us on the internet. We are now going to close for the passes, and I wish you all a great Sunday and a great week.